Hey, I'm Pascal and welcome to another video. That's not even my openings. Hey, I'm Pascal from Orangepixel. And that's what I always say for a couple of years now. Alright, welcome to another video. Last week's video spawned a little conversation on the Discord. And we got into scope and how do you define scope and where do you start to make sure you don't scope a game that's way too big. And then we ended up with game loops. And some people don't know what a game loop is. That's very normal. I told Alina I was recording a video about game loops, my wife, and she had no clue. So I explained it and then it clicked. It's not very difficult, but it is something that a lot of developers don't know or don't think about, or yeah, it's something that we should be talking about. I got 3 projects in development right now, and all 3 did something different with the game loop and how I developed it. One was done wrong, one was perfect, and the other one is searching still for the perfect or the best game loop. So 3 great examples. Let's talk about that after the intro. So let's start with the bad example of a game loop, because this will also explain how important it is to get your game loop up and running as fast as possible. It's the main focus when you start a new project. Focus on the game loop, nothing else. Honestly, the first game I'm gonna show as an example is Regulator City, my biggest project so far, or at least the project I've been working on for the longest, pretty much because I forgot the game loop. My idea for Regulator City when I started the project was very simple. I wanted something cool like the TV show SWAT or SEAL Team, where you are part of a team and everybody knows what to do and you're walking around and your team is there for you, your team is backing you up, and all that stuff looks extremely cool. That's what I wanted to create and that's what I focused on. But that's not a game loop, that's just a great setting and a nice extra. It's not a game loop. For the longest time I focused on that. I knew I wanted a street view and I knew I wanted an indoor area and we would be shooting things because, well, that's pretty much what you do with a team like that, highly trained soldiers. That's pretty much what I had, but it's not a game loop. A game loop is more basic. It's what does the player do, how does he do it, and repeat until it's game over or the player has won. So in Regulator City, eventually I had to come up with the game loop. I had all this AI stuff, I had it all up and running. I had no game, and that's why I struggled with the game. There was nothing there. So a couple of months ago, if you check the Regulator City views, or if you check the Regulator City devlogs on the playlist thingy, there was a period where I just wasn't sure what to do with the game, and that's mainly because I had no game loop. I had this cool AI, I had this cool squad running around with you. You could shoot things and things would shoot at you, but it had no structure. There was no point to it. Now I got the game loop up and running after my break in September, after my vacation break, and then got into it with fresh eyes and focused on that game loop. And I've been narrowing down on everything around that game loop ever since. I'm still doing it right now. So right now it's very easy. There's a city, there's a meteor that crashed. That's all story environment, that's not game loop. You start on the street, that's the first step of the game loop. You clear the area and you enter a door to enter the first mission. In that house you have to do a certain mission. Missions change, but you have to do a mission, that's part of the game loop. Take out the enemies by shooting them, part of the game loop. Completing the level, back on the street, move to the next mission, move to the next street, do the next mission, the next mission. It now has a game loop, it has a flow, and that flow is still tweaking because there was a lot of stuff going on, but now it's really very clear for the player what happens, when and how you do it and what to do. And I have a great game loop and I have a great game flow, and now we can actually start building on top of that, which has taken way too long, and I should have focused on that game loop first. Have missions, have things to take out and then complete a level and then move on. And I could have and I should have added all the AI and squad stuff later to the game. It was an idea I had, but the first thing I should have done was figure out what the game loop was gonna be. Top-down shooter and mission structure and all that stuff. It went wrong, and that's why I've been developing or working on this game for way too long. And that's why game loop, or getting that game loop up and running as fast as possible, is very important, because it saves you a lot of time. And that brings me to the game that has the least problem with its game loop, and that's Heroes of Loot Survivors, current working title. This game loop was pretty much the first thing I built. It took 2 or 3 iterations. I changed it a little bit from the original idea, but the loop is so simple that you are thrown in a dungeon room, there are monsters spawning around you, kill the monsters, then the doors open up, move to the next room, repeat. Meanwhile you have weapons, and those weapons are then implemented or built around you and automatically shoot, which is not part of the game loop but more of a game mechanic. But the game loop itself is very clear, and having that mechanic makes it interesting and different, and then we can build a lot of stuff on top of it. But having that game loop up and running in pretty much like the first week of development or the first couple of days of development, that really made this game's development move so very quickly and put it almost at the same level stepwise as where Regulated City is. There are like 8 development steps. I think I made a video about that before. At least for me there are 8 development steps. This will vary for everybody else. But it's like at the same level right now, but in a much shorter time. Once you have that game loop, you can start doing a lot of extras to it. Examples of that would be give the player more speed, give the player a double jump, give the player better weapons, give the player ways to find or discover secrets. Those things can be built on top of a great game loop, but you first need to have that first structure, that base thing. And once you have that up and running, it becomes a lot of fun just adding extra things, and you'll be playing your game, or testing, not playing, testing your game, because it's still work. You'll be testing your game, and you will come up with various things. You'll figure out that I want to be able to throw these enemies to the wall. So you'll add some sort of item or mechanic that allows you that, and then you'll just have it unlocked in later stages, or the player has to do something to unlock it, which adds another little thing. Now the player has to find something maybe that will unlock a way to throw monsters through, just throw monsters everywhere around you against walls or whatever. Or like I said, just a double jump. You'll have a platform game. Now the player has to search for a certain item, which will give him double jump special abilities, and then you can get to certain secret areas, or that way you can build out a game. But the game loop, the core game loop, and we should be counting the amount of times I say game loop in this video. I think it's a lot. But the game loop is the most important thing, which brings me to the third project, which is, this is what will happen to most games. The third project is Agents of Ooze. My third project currently in development, working on it together with Nathan, who's doing all the artwork for it. This game has gone through a lot of variations already. I wouldn't call it a prototype anymore, because the game has a bunch of stuff going on already, but we're not there yet with the core game loop, and it has changed a lot. The original idea for me was to have a portal, and then you spawn before that portal, then the enemies are attacking you from all directions, you have to kill them, and then you can either escape through the portal, which will refuel your energy or your life or whatever, but it will also give you a totally random different weapon, which might be a good thing, might be a bad thing. That was the original concept for the game loop. It didn't really work, or we didn't really get there. I still think it's a good loop, but probably not for this project. I think with some changes and tweaks I could build that into a game at some time. Maybe call it Groundskeeper 3 or whatever. It's in that direction. But that loop has changed. We then wanted extra pillars around the portal, and those pillars would then have to be powered, and then you could go to the portal, and then there are robots that drop gears, and you collect those, and then you can use them to buy new items. And then there's ooze, and a lot of interesting ideas, but nothing was really making that game loop perfect. Like I said, adding items and unlockable stuff is great, but you can add that to any type of game, even Tetris. Create 4 lines that clear up, and you get a certain bomb item that you can place. You see, you can do stuff like that to every game, but the game loop has to be there first. So we've been looking for the perfect thing. We are now, I think, close, but I said that before, to a interesting game loop, but we're not there yet. So we're not building everything around it yet, because it could be a waste of time, and we would probably be focusing on the wrong thing. We first need to get that game loop interesting and fun, and it's now leaning towards more of a base building defense, tower defense type style thing. Dome is a good example of such games right now. There are more of those. A wall, something with wall climbing, wall mounted thing on the wall, something like that, but a little bit different because it's top down. Our game is top down. It's going to be a different area type thing. It's going to be a little different in the tower defense, and we still have to structure all that, because if the player is going to be building a base, you don't want him to move to another level and pretty much lose everything. So the game will have to revolve around that base, and that changes a bunch of things that we had in mind, and now all those things have to come together to create that great game loop. There it is again. And once we have that, we can start building the world, and we're close, but we're not there yet. So those are three very different examples of games with their game loop and the issues they can create. And of course, Heroes of Loot is a dream project right now. The game loop was up and running in such a short time that I can just focus on everything around it, and already know it's going to be a great game, because that loop is addictive is not the right word. I think we shouldn't be using that for games. It's not addictive. You can quit whenever you want, but it's really tickling that one more go feeling, and that's really what you want in a game, or at least something that allows people to get back into your game or dive back into that world you're creating. And for that you need a great game loop. Right. Right. Alright, so biggest question might be, how do you get to a great game loop? A great idea certainly helps in that area, but luckily for you, games have been around for many decades. So there are a lot of game ideas you can already borrow, and that's not stealing, that's not copying or cloning. That's pretty much how game development has evolved, from the first game all the way to, well, the latest 3D spectacle or virtual reality spectacle you can find and figure out and think about. It all started with a little, I don't know, Pong, probably, a bat, a ball, two bats and one ball, and the game loop was pretty simple in that one. Player can move up and down, and the ball is, and they have to hit it, and it's pretty much tennis, pretty much. And that's a game loop, and that evolved into wall breaker games. So your bat would suddenly be at the bottom, and you could move left and right, and there was a wall at the top, and then that ball would hit those bat or those stones thingies, and then it turned into that was a very simple one. Then it turned into something that you got power-ups and items, still the same game loop, but then you had all these items, and you could shoot at stones, or you had 3 balls or 4 balls, or you could freeze balls or slow down, or all those type of things, or your bat would be larger or shrink. They took that game loop and they added more items to it, and it all evolved from there. And of course, platform games, the first couple of platform games were just a single screen. You could jump and maybe only up and down, and not even left and right at the same time, just up and down, and do stuff like that. Then we started moving the screen so that you could suddenly move into a whole world that was hidden behind the screen, and it would scroll over, and you would be like a first Mario, or actually a second Mario, but it was called the first Mario. The original Mario was one screen. Then there was a Super Mario Brothers, and that was suddenly scrolling, and then you could move, and then you had power-ups, and that all evolved into the platform games we have now. And there's a lot more going on. You can go up, down, faster worlds, and there's much more to do, but the game loop is still there. And that's pretty much how games have been evolving forever. So you can just go back, find an interesting game, find and try to locate what the actual game loop is in those games, and build on top of that. Build something new and interesting, add a little tweak to the game loop, and you'll have something new. And that's pretty much how game development works. For me, I try to borrow from different genres at the same time, and then I usually build something, play it a lot, and while I'm playing, I'll figure out if something is fun to do, or if I could maybe if I want to do something else while I'm doing it. That's usually a good indicator that maybe should go in a little different direction. But is it enjoyable, and do I want to go back to it? If I'm done with testing, do I want to go back and test it again? Do I get enthusiastic about it? If not, even if it's a good game loop, I'm probably not going to create that game, because if I can't get enthusiastic about the game I'm working on, it's probably not the right game for me to be working on, pretty much. So that's really much how you... So yeah, game loop, you have to test it, try it. Good examples are game jams, where you have only like 48 hours and then try to get something up and running. Often that's just missing little things because you had a very short time, but if you can put more time into those type of titles, you'll get something better and hopefully something worthy of a full release at some point. So game loops, very important. And that's it for this week's video. Thanks for watching. I try to mix these type of videos with my normal devlogs and talks about game and business and all that stuff. Every now and then, a couple of tips here and there. And I hope that helps you guys create other games. And I'm getting a lot of feedback from viewers that this channel is inspiring to them. And that's pretty much great. That's a bonus for me. That's really what I want. I want to show you all the facets of game development and the business around it. And it's hard work and it's very difficult to do, but it's a lot of fun also. And it's pretty much my life. So I really enjoy talking about it, and I really enjoy. And it's been great to see everybody watch these videos, and the channel is growing. There's people coming on the Discord, a lot of people, a lot of fun. So thanks for watching this video. Next week I'll talk about one of my games, because Regulator City, I'm closing in on a new demo which will be available on Steam. Check the description for its page. And I might also be working on Heroes of Loot and on Agents of Ooze, trying to find that perfect game loop exactly. So got a lot of stuff to do. Thanks for watching this video. Bye!